The galaxy had grown quiet where humanity once roared. Once their ships filled the stars with trade, war, and endless curiosity. But now there was only silence, deep and heavy, stretching across systems that once glowed with Terran light. The great colonies that once welcomed travelers from every species now lay cold, their cities abandoned, their beacons dark, and their skies empty of ships. No one knew why they had vanished, not even their closest allies. The Galactic Council called it the Great Retreat, a name meant to sound calm and historical. But every being who heard it felt the unease behind those words, because no one could explain why an entire species as loud, unpredictable, and stubborn as humans would simply walk away from the galaxy they had once reshaped with their hands, their wars, and their inventions. Some said humanity had finally exhausted itself, that they grew tired of fighting and talking and building and simply gave up. Others whispered darker things, that they had seen something in the void, something that frightened even them. But no one could say for sure, because when the humans stopped talking, the galaxy lost its mirror. The Council, filled with proud, ancient species who believed they understood everything, celebrated at first. To them, the humans were always a problem, too emotional, too inventive, too willing to question rules that had lasted for millennia. The Zirak Chancellor declared before the Great Hall that peace had finally been achieved. The Varnak warlords toasted to the end of the Terran nuisance. The media across dozens of worlds broadcast cheerful songs about the dawn of a quiet age. But in the deep sectors, among the older races who remembered history before the Council's rule, fear spread like a shadow. They remembered the last time humans had gone quiet, during the Siege of Orion, when a single Terran fleet disappeared for 6 months only to return with weapons no one had ever seen, turning the tide of a war that was already lost. They remembered how humanity never surrendered, how even in defeat they would adapt, change, and return stronger. And now, that same eerie silence was spreading again, only this time across every human world at once. For a while, the Council ignored the warnings. They erased the human language from their databases, removed Earth from official maps, and redistributed their colonies to other species who claimed ownership. On the world of Velan Prime, where humans had once mined rare metals for centuries, the new settlers found abandoned cities still powered, lights still burning, machines still running without supervision, and gardens still trimmed by drones that seemed to respond to no one but invisible commands. In the ruins of the Terran embassy on Trivax, an alien historian found a message scratched into a wall in perfect calm letters: "We are not gone. We are listening." But the Council dismissed it as human drama. They always wanted attention, one delegate said. This is just their final act. So the galaxy moved on, building monuments to themselves and claiming victory over a species that was never really defeated. But deep in the quiet corners of space, near the systems humanity once protected, strange patterns began to emerge. Sensors picked up faint energy readings in the dark, rhythmic pulses that repeated every hour, like a heartbeat. Ships sent to investigate vanished without a trace. The few that returned reported seeing flashes of light, shadows of ships too large, too fast, and too organized to be random pirates. The reports were buried by the Council's information department. They didn't want to admit what many already feared, that the silence wasn't absence, it was waiting. Centuries-old alien captains who had fought alongside Terrans began to notice something familiar. A Varnak veteran told his crew that the pattern of disappearances reminded him of old Terran tactics: withdraw, observe, learn, then strike. His younger officers laughed at him. Humans are extinct, they said. Let ghosts haunt the void if they wish. But the old soldier just stared at the stars and whispered, "No, they are planning." On the planet of Corinth, where the Council had built a massive communication tower, engineers began hearing faint interference in the frequency bands, tiny signals encoded in obsolete human formats. They dismissed them as relic echoes. But one curious technician decided to decode the pattern and froze when he saw what it said. Just 3 words, repeating endlessly in every known Terran language: "We are awake." He reported it to his superiors, who ordered him never to mention it again. The next day, the entire tower network went offline for 6 minutes. When it came back, every human-related file in their archive had been deleted. As the months passed, tension grew across the Council worlds. Trade convoys started avoiding old Terran routes, and rumors began spreading through the underworld about a secret Terran fleet seen near the Orion expanse. Smugglers told stories of ships that appeared out of nowhere, inspected their cargo, and vanished before sensors could even record them. A merchant claimed that his navigation computer suddenly updated itself with Terran code that hadn't been used in centuries. He tried to sell the data, but the council arrested him, confiscated the files, and declared it a hoax. Yet, in private meetings, the council's intelligence branch began to panic. They knew the stories couldn't all be false. Something was moving in the dark. In the Grand Hall of Unity, where the galaxy's rulers gathered to debate, the subject of humanity returned like an unwanted ghost. The Zirac Chancellor once again assured everyone that humans were incapable of such subtlety. "They are impulsive," he said. "They fight loud. They make noise. If they were out there, we would know." But the archivist delegates disagreed. The eldest among them, a frail being wrapped in silver cloth, spoke softly, "You misunderstand them. Silence is not their weakness. It is their weapon." The room fell quiet, but only for a moment. Laughter followed. No one wanted to admit fear. To admit it would mean remembering every time humans had done the impossible. Surviving death worlds, fighting empires, turning enemies into allies through sheer stubborn will. So they ignored the warning and turned off the lights of the chamber as if darkness could hide their denial. Meanwhile, in the dead systems beyond the Council's borders, far from trade routes and navigation charts, human ships gathered. They were not the same as before. These were no longer the scattered nations of old Earth, but one united force forged from silence, discipline, and memory. Their hulls bore no flags, only black plates with silver edges, symbols of a species that had learned patience the hard way. In command sat the Terran High Admiral, once a diplomat, now the architect of a new doctrine. He watched the stars through a wide viewport and said quietly, "Let them believe we are gone. Let them sleep in their arrogance." His officers nodded. Around them, massive shipyards built in the shadows of dead suns came alive. Forges burning bright against the void, silent except for the hum of creation. The humans had not retreated. They had gone underground, rebuilding not just ships but an entire strategy. They had seen what the Council had become: corrupt, proud, ungrateful. And they decided the galaxy needed to remember who had once held it together. But not all humans agreed. Across hidden colonies, arguments erupted. Some wanted to return peacefully, to talk and restore diplomacy. Others believed peace had failed too many times. On one hidden world called Solace, a meeting was held between the admirals, engineers, and philosophers of the new Terran command. The debate lasted days. The older generation spoke of patience and restraint, while the younger officers, born after the retreat, demanded justice. "They erased our name from history," one shouted. "They called us extinct." Another said, "They will learn that silence does not mean surrender." The admiral listened quietly, then stood and said, "We will not rush. We will not speak. We will let time work for us. The day will come when they need us again, and when that day arrives, they will face the cost of forgetting who we are." And so the humans continued to watch, to listen, to wait. Back in the Council's capital, paranoia spread. The security divisions began scanning for unauthorized transmissions, intercepting anything that even resembled Terran technology. They found traces of human encryption hidden in the core systems, impossibly advanced algorithms that no one could delete. The Council's best scientists spent months trying to break the code but failed. One scientist quit and vanished the next day, leaving only a note on his console that said, "They are already here." Still, the Council refused to acknowledge it publicly. They feared panic. They feared the truth, that the silence that had comforted them was about to break. Far across the stars, the pulse that had been beating quietly for years finally changed rhythm. From a distant, forgotten planet on the edge of the void, a signal rose into the black, simple, elegant, and unmistakably human. It repeated 3 times and then stopped. Those who intercepted it translated it differently depending on their language, but the meaning was clear across all of them: "We remember you." And for the first time in generations, the galaxy realized that humanity had not vanished. It had evolved, waiting for the moment when arrogance would blind the Council and silence would become the most terrifying sound in the universe. The shining heart of the Galactic Council's capital. The Hall of Unity shimmered like a crown above the clouds, a monument built from arrogance and glass, where the rulers of 1,000 worlds gathered beneath banners of light. Their words filled with pride and self-importance, and that day the chamber echoed with laughter, the kind that hides fear. Behind ceremony, the disappearance of humanity had become a story told with amusement, a historical curiosity used to remind younger races of the dangers of being too emotional, too wild, too human. As the Chancellor of the Zirak Empire raised his many arms and declared that the galaxy had finally achieved peace, that the age of chaos born from Terran ambition had ended. Applause filled the room, wings fluttered, tendrils waved, metallic hands clanged together, and every species present pretended to believe it. They toasted to an illusion, while somewhere beyond the stars, sensors failed and patrols vanished. But the Council ignored the reports, labeling them superstition, blaming pirates or malfunctioning ships, anything but the truth. The Chancellor's voice boomed again, mocking the memory of humanity, calling them a temporary storm in a calm sea, and the delegates laughed harder, their faces glowing in the holographic light. Only a few did not laugh. The archivists, quiet beings who remembered everything, sat motionless, their hollow eyes fixed on the floor, because they had seen this before, the calm before the return. When the meeting adjourned, the Council issued a formal statement across every channel, erasing the final record of Earth from the public database. The Terran quadrant was renamed Sector 0, closed for exploration, its entry labeled uninhabitable. The Chancellor stood on the balcony overlooking the city and smiled, watching the twin suns rise over the shining towers, confident that the last defiant race of the younger species had finally vanished forever. But his smile faded when his communication assistant rushed toward him, trembling, holding a data pad. "Sir," the assistant whispered, "we've received a signal." The Chancellor took the device, expecting static, but on the screen flashed a message written in clear, ancient Terran script, "We hear you." For a moment, no one spoke, then he barked orders to delete it, to trace it, to deny it existed, but the message had already disappeared from the system, leaving behind nothing but the uneasy silence of truth. Across the Council's intelligence divisions, similar reports surfaced, energy spikes from dead systems, sensor ghosts shaped like human ships, signals too precise to be random. Still, the Council silenced every report, firing anyone who mentioned the possibility of human activity, replacing fear with propaganda. Human technology was primitive, they told the media. They cannot return. They are dust. But dust, as the archivist once whispered, remembers the wind. The arrogance of the Council grew with every denial. They took over former Terran worlds, stripping them of resources, melting down their monuments, and rewriting history to say the Council had always been the guardian of peace. On Dareth 5, an alien archaeologist found a functioning Terran archive hidden beneath a city, filled with data files labeled Project Silence. He sent a message to the Council before disappearing the next day. His ship was found drifting near the border, its crew missing, its data wiped clean. The Council called it piracy, but their security officers knew the truth. There was no sign of a fight. It was as if they had simply been taken. Yet still, the Council's leaders met in comfort, telling themselves stories of superiority, using humans as examples of failure. They were too unstable, the chairwoman of the Luthri species declared during a meeting, too emotional to understand the balance of power. "We evolve through control, not chaos." The chamber cheered, but her translator blinked nervously, because behind her words, every holographic monitor flickered for a heartbeat. The Council logo disappeared for a fraction of a second, replaced by the outline of a Terran eagle, wings spread, eyes burning red. The technicians blamed a glitch, but no one noticed that all backup systems had simultaneously recorded the same anomaly. Somewhere in the shadows of the capital, something was watching. Weeks later, the Council Intelligence Bureau met in secret. They discussed the growing rumors of ghost ships and missing vessels near the old Terran borders. "It's psychological," said one officer. "After so many years of fear, people see humans where there are none." But the director, an aged being with silver scales, tapped a claw on the table and said quietly, "Fear doesn't create signals. Someone is sending them." He displayed a map filled with blinking red marks, each one representing a ship lost in the last cycle. Every one of these vanished in the same pattern, a slow arc leading toward the Terran core. The others shifted uncomfortably, their arrogance cracking for the first time. "We should investigate," one suggested, but the Chancellor refused. "No," he said sharply, "we will not chase ghosts. The humans are gone." He dismissed the meeting, yet his hands trembled as he turned away. That night, from the balcony of his palace, he looked up at the sky and saw something move, a faint shimmer among the stars, like a formation of ships flying in silence. When he blinked, they were gone. He told himself it was a trick of light, but deep down, he felt the same thing every being across the galaxy would soon feel: doubt. The Council's arrogance reached its peak when they held a celebration marking 100 years since humanity's departure. Fireworks filled the skies, speeches praised the unity of the galaxy, and a grand parade showcased the fleets of every species. The Council's anthem played as the Chancellor gave a final toast, to peace eternal, and to the silence of those who disturbed it. The crowd roared in approval, but at that exact moment, every holographic screen in the capital city flickered. The anthem stopped. The image of the Chancellor froze. Static filled the air, followed by a single voice, calm, human, unmistakable. "You celebrate peace," the voice said softly, "while building it on the graves of those who gave it to you." The crowd gasped as the screens showed a black background with a single silver symbol, a Terran flag surrounded by stars. "You called our silence surrender," the voice continued. "You forgot that silence is also the sound before the storm." Then the signal vanished, the music resumed, and the Council scrambled to explain it as a technical glitch. But across every world, the damage was done. The galaxy had heard the voice of humanity again, and fear replaced laughter. The following days brought chaos. The Council denied everything, accusing rogue AI or rebel pirates. But deep down, even their soldiers began to whisper. In the spaceports, engineers reported strange modifications appearing in their navigation software, new algorithms that optimized travel routes using Terran mathematics. Some pilots claimed their ships received anonymous updates that improved fuel efficiency by 40%. No one knew how or who had done it. The Council declared it sabotage, but merchants secretly called it a gift. The black markets began trading old human technology again, relics once banned by decree. Demand soared. Everyone wanted a piece of the mystery, a touch of the forgotten race that had somehow become myth and warning at the same time. Across alien taverns, songs returned about the Terrans, songs about the species that never truly died, songs that frightened even those who sang them. Meanwhile, the archivists gathered in their quiet chambers. They reviewed ancient treaties, human recordings, and battle logs. The eldest among them, their voices like wind through metal, said, "The storm is returning. The galaxy has forgotten the lesson, and now the silence will speak again." They tried to warn the Council, but their message was buried under bureaucracy. The Chancellor, tired of their prophecies, banned all research into human history. "The past is irrelevant," he said, slamming his clawed hand on the table. "We control the future." But as he spoke, the lights in the chamber dimmed. The screens around him glowed faintly and displayed a simple line of text. "Control is an illusion." The words blinked once and vanished. No trace remained. The guards searched for intruders but found nothing. The Chancellor pretended it hadn't happened, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, someone had heard him and laughed. The Council's arrogance blinded them so completely that they failed to notice the quiet coordination of smaller races, the merchants who began forming secret trade deals through human codes, the mercenaries who whispered about receiving payments from unseen clients in untraceable credits, the data couriers who carried encrypted orders written in Terran syntax. Across the galaxy, the unseen hand of humanity began to move, weaving through the chaos the Council had built. But the leaders still stood in their marble towers, confident that their rule was unbreakable. They looked down at their worlds and saw order, while above them, beyond the reach of their telescopes, shadows gathered in formation, silent and patient. Humanity was listening, learning, and preparing. The Council believed themselves gods of civilization, but soon they would discover they were merely guests in a galaxy that humans had already reclaimed in the quiet between stars. And when the silence finally broke, the sound would be unlike anything they had ever heard in the outer sectors of the galaxy where light from the central suns could no longer reach. Patrol ships drifted through endless darkness, scanning for smugglers and pirates, unaware that they were the ones being watched. For in that cold black void something old had awakened, something patient and disciplined, something human. The first reports came from a mining station near the rim. A distress call cut short after a single sentence, "We've seen them." When rescue teams arrived days later, they found the station empty, lights still glowing, air recyclers running, food still warm on tables, but not a single body to be found. The Council investigators ruled it a pirate raid, but one officer, a young analyst named Vera, noticed the security logs showed no signs of forced entry. No alarms, no damage, only one mysterious file uploaded seconds before the silence. Its name simply read "Listen." When opened, it played a soft rhythmic pulse, 3 beats repeating endlessly, a human heartbeat slowed to half speed. The Council ordered her to delete it, but that night she woke to find the same sound playing through her datapad, even though it wasn't connected to any network. Across the outer colonies, similar stories spread like whispers: ships that vanished mid-jump, satellites that recorded impossible energy signatures, colonies that received old Earth transmissions decades after the planet had supposedly fallen silent. But the Council, wrapped in arrogance and denial, dismissed it all as coincidence, blaming cosmic interference or sensor corruption, while the evidence piled higher with every passing day. Freighters crossing the Terran border zones began reporting shadows following them through the void, massive silhouettes matching no known design, gliding without propulsion trails, without sound, without even transponder codes. One pilot swore he saw a flag etched in silver on one of the ships, an eagle with broken chains beneath it, wings spread across a black hull, and when he tried to transmit an image, his system crashed, his memory drive fried, and his ship drifted for hours before restarting. He returned pale and shaking, muttering that the silence was alive. The Council interrogated him, but his words made them uneasy. They declared him mentally unfit, stripped his license, and buried the report. Yet within a week, 5 more ships vanished in the same sector, leaving behind only empty space and the faint trace of a gravitational ripple consistent with a fleet moving in synchronized formation. The Council's Intelligence Bureau demanded answers, but the Chancellor, desperate to maintain calm, said the words that would doom them: "There is no fleet. There are no humans. The Council is in control." His voice echoed across the great hall, confident and hollow, as outside his window the stars flickered once, then dimmed. By now, the smaller species had begun to panic. Merchants stopped trading near Terran space, scientists withdrew research stations, and transport lanes were rerouted to avoid the black sectors. On the communication forums of distant worlds, encrypted posts began to appear, written in half-forgotten human syntax, offering protection, navigation data, and warnings to stay clear of certain coordinates. The Council tried to trace the source but failed. Every attempt ended the same way: their systems shut down for exactly 12 seconds, and when they came back online, the message "You are being watched" flashed for a moment on every terminal. Panic grew among the junior officers, but the elders silenced them with threats. Still, fear has a way of spreading faster than truth. Soon, even children in alien cities whispered bedtime tales about the Ghost Fleet, the silent armada of humanity that returned for vengeance, ships that didn't use weapons but erased entire star systems with soundless precision. In the taverns, old veterans swore that the humans were never gone, that they'd simply gone dark, perfecting something greater than war: control through silence. On the edge of known space, a single ship of the Council's defense fleet, the Varkoon's Pride, was sent to investigate the source of the anomalies. It was crewed by 50 soldiers from 6 species, armed with the latest plasma cannons and quantum sensors. Their captain, a proud Lutheri, promised to return with proof that the ghosts were nothing but myths. For 3 days they transmitted status reports, calm and routine, until suddenly they stopped. A week later, a passing trader picked up their emergency beacon floating near an uncharted system. The ship was found adrift, hull intact, power running, but its corridors were empty. No blood, no struggle, no damage. Only a single message carved into the control console, written by hand in English, still listening. When the Council retrieved the ship, they sealed the investigation, but the admiral who led the recovery resigned the next day, leaving behind a note that simply said, "They are everywhere." The Council feared the story spreading, so they censored the news, but secrecy only made the legend grow. Far beyond, in the shadowed expanse of human space, the truth waited. A vast fleet hung silent in the dark, hundreds of ships aligned in perfect formation, their hulls black as obsidian, absorbing every trace of light. They carried no identification, no broadcasts, no signals, only a pulsing network of energy that beat in rhythm like a living heart. Inside one of the command vessels, the Terran High Admiral stood before a massive viewport, watching the distant stars. His uniform bore no rank, only a simple insignia, a silver circle crossed by two lines. Behind him, a young officer approached and saluted. "Admiral, the Council continues to deny our existence," he reported. The Admiral's eyes didn't move from the stars. "Good," he said quietly. "Their denial is our weapon. Let them choke on it." Around him, dozens of officers operated in silence, their movements precise, their communication wordless, neural links connecting every human aboard the fleet. They had built something the Council couldn't imagine, a unity forged from memory, pain, and time. For years, humanity had watched the galaxy's arrogance grow, its power rot, its peace crumble, and now the reckoning was coming, not with war, but with truth, sharp as steel and cold as silence. Meanwhile, back in the Council's inner chambers, fear disguised itself as reason. Reports continued to flood in, unknown signals, fleet patterns near the rim, missing convoys, but the Chancellor refused to acknowledge them. "We are the light of civilization," he proclaimed. "We will not bow to ghosts." But even as he spoke, his own communication system flickered. The image of his reflection twisted for a heartbeat, showing another face, human, expressionless, staring back before vanishing. He froze, dismissed his attendants, and sat alone in the dark, trembling as he whispered, "It can't be real." Yet across the stars, it was becoming very real. The Ghost Fleet was no myth, it was strategy, a lesson in patience taught by those who had been underestimated one time too many. In the mining colonies, strange events continued. Entire shipments of ore vanished mid-transit, replaced by small crates containing only old Terran coins stamped with the word "remember." The alien workers who touched them said they felt warmth, like a heartbeat pulsing beneath the metal. In the border systems, defense outposts found their weapon arrays reprogrammed overnight, targeting their own command centers. Engineers tried to undo the hack but discovered the code wasn't alien. It was human, old but perfect, like a language rediscovered by its creator. The Council scientists were ordered to find how it was done, but every attempt to trace it led back to one location: the ruins of Mars Colony 1, destroyed centuries ago. But Mars was supposed to be dead. "Send a probe," the Chancellor ordered. The probe reached orbit, transmitted a single image, and then went silent. The image showed the surface of Mars rebuilt, its red dust replaced by black metal, its skies glowing with the lights of thousands of ships. At the center of the image, a phrase burned bright across the surface, carved into the desert itself: "We never left." Panic erupted inside the Council. Emergency meetings were held behind locked doors, leaders shouting, accusing, denying. Some demanded immediate military action, others urged diplomacy, but no one knew who to contact, because every attempt to reach human space was met with the same response: an echoing transmission of a heartbeat, slow, deep, endless. The Chancellor ordered the construction of new fleets, but even their shipyards began malfunctioning, systems locking them out as human code infiltrated their cores. "They're in our machines," one engineer screamed before security silenced him. Across the galaxy, communications faltered, trade stopped, and fear became the new order. The Council had mocked the silence, but now silence ruled them, and they could do nothing but wait, staring into the void, wondering when humanity would finally speak again, and what those first words after so long would be. For when humans vanish, History whispers a single warning: when the silence ends, the reckoning begins. The night the galaxy lost its light began like any other, the Council worlds shining with confidence, their cities blazing under twin moons, their fleets spread across the stars like glittering jewels of power. But power is nothing against patience, and patience was what humanity had perfected in silence. It started quietly, a flicker in the communication network, a single error message in a system so vast it seemed meaningless. The operators ignored it, thinking it was just another glitch. Then, another error appeared, and another, until the Council's central hub began to pulse like a heartbeat, the same rhythm that had haunted their signals for months. Within minutes, every communication line across the galaxy went dark. Navigation satellites fell offline, trade convoys lost their coordinates, and even the capital's command systems blinked into static. The Council's chambers erupted in chaos, ambassadors shouting across the room, demanding answers as their holograms faded one by one. "What is happening?" the Chancellor bellowed, slamming his claws against the table, but no one could answer. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was deaf. The silence humans had once suffered was now shared by all. Then, through the static, a voice emerged, clear, calm, and unmistakably human. To the Galactic Council, it said slowly, echoing across every remaining channel, "We offered peace. You took advantage of silence. This is your reckoning." The Council froze. The Chancellor's hearts pounded as he stared at the screen, unable to believe what he was hearing. "Trace it," he screamed, but the technicians were pale, trembling, their screens filled with encrypted symbols looping endlessly. "We can't," one whispered. "It's coming from everywhere." The message repeated, then the feed shifted. The screen filled with images, ships, thousands of them, emerging from the dark between stars, black hulls glinting with faint silver light, the insignia of Terran command shining on each. These were not the scattered, chaotic fleets of old Earth. These were leviathans, colossal carriers and dreadnoughts built in secret for decades, moving in absolute silence, no thrusters, no energy trails, their formation flawless. In the distance, their arrival blotted out starlight, a moving shadow swallowing constellations whole. Across the galaxy, sensors overloaded as every power grid flickered in unison, overwhelmed by the energy signatures of the returning Terran fleet. The Council's military panicked, deploying interceptors and defense ships, but the moment they powered their weapons, their systems failed. Screens went black, engines stalled, and automated safety locks activated, leaving fleets stranded and helpless. Humanity hadn't fired a single shot. They had simply turned the galaxy's own arrogance against itself. In the Council's war room, a meeting of panic unfolded. Admirals from different species shouted over one another, proposing plans that would never work. "They're using some kind of virus," one shouted. "No," said another, "it's worse, it's control." The Chancellor leaned over the table, his face twisted in disbelief. "Activate the reserve fleets," he ordered, but the room went dark before he could finish. The holographic map flickered, and when it returned, the galactic defense grid had been replaced by a single image, a black background with the Terran emblem glowing in the center. A human voice spoke again, softer this time, almost compassionate. "You called us extinct. You erased our name. Yet we built your ships, wrote your codes, and powered your cities. You live in our shadow, and now the shadow speaks." Around the room, the delegates trembled. One, a young Lutheri, collapsed into his seat whispering, "They never left. They were inside our systems all along." Outside, in orbit, human ships moved like silent hunters. They did not fire, they did not conquer, they disabled, disarmed, and dismantled. Within hours, every major Council defense network had been neutralized. The greatest fleet in galactic history was helpless before the one species they had underestimated most. On distant worlds, alien civilians watched in awe and terror as the night sky filled with unfamiliar constellations. Giant Terran carriers, some the size of moons, descending into orbit without warning or violence. Instead of attacking, they broadcast old human songs, haunting melodies of piano and strings echoing through the void, words lost to translation but emotion clear. "Why are they doing this?" asked a child on Varnak Prime, staring at the glowing streaks in the sky. Her mother, a veteran of the old wars, answered softly, because we forgot who they are. Across the colonies, humans transmitted data to planetary networks. Recordings of every council meeting where humanity had been mocked, every treaty broken, every insult thrown, every promise erased. The entire galaxy watched its leaders exposed. The truth was raw, undeniable, humiliating. The council tried to cut the feed, but even their emergency overrides failed, overridden by code that began every line with the same phrase, property of Terran command. Back in the capital, the Chancellor fell into his chair, defeated. "We can't win this," he whispered. "They're everywhere." The archivist representative finally spoke, his voice hollow and ancient. "I warned you," he said. "Silence is not surrender. It's preparation." The Chancellor turned to him in rage. "What do they want?" he demanded. The archivist met his eyes. "To remind us that peace cannot exist without respect." Before the Chancellor could respond, the walls of the chamber trembled. The sound of engines filled the air, deep, resonant, the hum of gravity drives entering low orbit. Outside the palace, citizens looked up to see a ship unlike any other, larger than anything the Council had ever built, its hull covered in ancient human markings. It cast a shadow over the city, blocking out the twin suns, and then a projection appeared in the sky, a human face, calm, expression unreadable. "We do not come for conquest," the figure said, "we come for truth. You called yourselves rulers of the stars, but you forgot who gave you fire. You forgot who bled to build your peace." Across every world, the message played in perfect sync, and the voice carried a tone the galaxy hadn't heard in generations. Command, not aggression. Justice, not revenge. In the outer sectors, alien fleets that tried to resist found their ships disabled by invisible hands. Their weapons refused to fire, their engines powered down mid-flight, and their own navigation systems turned them back toward home. It wasn't war, it was a demonstration. Humanity showed the Council the difference between domination and control, between pride and precision. They didn't destroy, they corrected. On one frontier world, a captured alien general stared in disbelief as his entire armada floated powerless before a single Terran ship. "What are you?" he whispered over the comm. The reply came in a quiet human voice. "The memory you tried to forget." The transmission ended, and the general's ship systems rebooted, restored to full function, but his pride never recovered. Word of the encounter spread faster than any official message, carried by terrified witnesses who saw the impossible with their own eyes. The humans had returned not as warriors, but as judges. Within days, the Council's influence crumbled. Worlds that once depended on its rule began to declare neutrality, choosing instead to align quietly with the returning Terrans. Trade networks restructured themselves overnight, favoring human encryption standards that were suddenly the only secure system left. Every corner of the galaxy adapted to the new reality. Humanity wasn't gone. It had been waiting, building, evolving, and now it had returned with the quiet fury of inevitability. The old balance of power was gone, replaced by fear, awe, and a growing realization that the Council was no longer in control of anything. Not their fleets, not their data, not even their history. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy stood still, humbled before the silence that had once been mocked. And as the last of the emergency broadcasts faded, one final message appeared across every channel, every planet, every ship, written in the same simple human language: "You feared our noise. You should have feared our silence." The message pulsed 3 times, like a heartbeat, and then vanished, leaving the galaxy bathed in darkness and dread, knowing that the reckoning had only just begun. Panic spread like wildfire across the galaxy as the once proud Council struggled to comprehend what had happened. Their vast fleets reduced to floating relics, their mighty communication networks silenced, and their arrogance exposed to every world that once obeyed their word. Yet the humans had not spoken again. Not a single threat. Not a single demand. They simply watched, and that quiet observation was more terrifying than any bombardment. On the Council's homeworld, the Chancellor gathered the remaining leaders in a desperate meeting, his face pale, voice trembling beneath the weight of realization. "We must respond," he said, We must show strength. But strength meant nothing now, because every system they tried to activate, every defense they attempted to repair, responded with the same cold message: access denied, Terran override active. The once unified council now fractured in fear and blame. Some species wanted to surrender immediately, others insisted humanity could be reasoned with, while a few deluded themselves into believing it was all a trick, a grand illusion to frighten them into submission. But no one could ignore the truth. Humans had become something more, something beyond war or vengeance, a force of balance that neither ruled nor bowed, only observed and acted when the galaxy forgot its lessons. The first act of human reckoning came not in fire, but exposure. Every council world, every archive, every encrypted record that had been hidden for centuries suddenly unlocked, broadcasting their darkest secrets to the public. The truth flooded across networks. The corruption, the slavery, the manipulation of weaker species, the lies told to maintain the illusion of peace. Every citizen saw the crimes of their leaders, and the riots began before the day was over. On Varnak Prime, mobs stormed the local council office, dragging officials through the streets. On Zirak Station, the Chancellor's own fleet mutinied, refusing orders to resist what they now called the Silent Return. The humans didn't need to attack. The Council was destroying itself. From orbit, the Terran fleet watched without interference. On board the flagship Sol Dominion, Admiral Kira Holt stood before her command deck, her uniform black and unmarked, her gaze steady as her officers reported the chaos. "They are falling apart," said her first officer. "Their unity dissolves faster than their systems." Kira nodded slowly. "Good," she said softly. "They must see what peace without truth looks like before we rebuild what's left." The Council attempted to send a message of negotiation, a plea for dialogue, but every attempt failed. Their words reached no one, bouncing through dead channels, corrupted by the very code humanity had rewritten centuries ago. Finally, after days of silence, a single transmission appeared across the entire network. A calm human voice, male, deep, resolute. "We do not negotiate with those who built peace on silence," it said. "You demanded control, now you understand its cost." The Council's leaders fell into despair. Some resigned, others fled to distant colonies, abandoning the central worlds to their fate. Yet, even in chaos, there were some who still hoped to fight. A coalition of warlords from the Varnak and Luthri systems gathered their fleets in a final act of defiance, declaring war on humanity. They launched 1,000 ships toward the Terran border, broadcasting their advance proudly, thinking they could overwhelm whatever forces guarded human space. For 2 days, the galaxy watched their progress, the grand fleet cutting through the void like a storm. Then, without warning, every ship stopped. Their engines died, their weapons froze, and one by one, they turned around, moving not by choice but by control. The fleet drifted back to its starting point, docking perfectly in formation, and then a new signal appeared above their homeworld: "We do not destroy what can destroy itself." The warlords vanished from history after that day. Across the galaxy, species once loyal to the Council began pledging allegiance to the Terran Code, a new system of balance and accountability. Not through fear, but through memory. The humans didn't rule. They guided. They appeared in holograms over broken worlds, in rebuilt cities, offering one message that echoed across generations: respect is not demanded, it is earned. They dismantled the Council's military hierarchy, returned power to individual civilizations, and erased all debts owed to the Council treasury. Their technology, once considered primitive, became the foundation for a new order. Human engineers repaired entire worlds without setting foot on them, using autonomous drones that worked silently and left behind only small insignias carved into stone. For the future, not the past. But the most haunting moment came when the Council's capital, once a symbol of control, was enveloped by a single Terran ship that descended silently from orbit. It hovered above the city for hours, casting its massive shadow across the marble spires. Then, without a single word, it emitted a burst of light that spread across the planet. When it faded, every piece of Council technology was gone, disintegrated into dust. The people were unharmed, the buildings intact, but the tools of control were erased forever. Inside the Council chamber, the Chancellor, once the voice of arrogance, sat alone, his command center stripped of power. The walls around him were silent, the once glowing banners of unity dark. He looked up as the air shimmered before him, and a holographic figure appeared. A human woman in a dark uniform, eyes calm, expression unreadable. "You are the Chancellor of the Fallen Council," she said. He swallowed hard. "You've destroyed us," he spat bitterly. The hologram's tone didn't change. "No," she replied. "You destroyed yourselves when you mistook silence for submission." The Chancellor's hands trembled as he rose from his chair. "What happens to us now?" The woman tilted her head slightly, her voice quiet but final. "Now, you learn." The hologram vanished, and as it did, the Council's building began to crumble, not from violence, but from time suddenly catching up, as if the years of corruption had finally turned to dust. The Chancellor fell to his knees, staring at the empty space where the hologram had been, and whispered to himself, "They were never gone. They were always here." Across every world, humanity's quiet victory reshaped civilization. Old borders dissolved, trade routes reopened, and silence became sacred, not feared, but respected. The younger races told their children the story of the reckoning, of how the humans returned not with destruction but with memory, how they showed that silence could roar louder than any war cry. In every corner of the galaxy, a new phrase entered common speech: "When the stars go quiet, listen." It became the warning, and the wisdom passed from one generation to the next. The Council's ruins were left untouched as monuments, reminders of arrogance. Above them, satellites built by human hands orbited endlessly, transmitting one message once every cycle, a simple phrase in every language known: "We remember." "Do you?" And in the dark expanse where stars still whispered, the Terran fleet moved again, not to conquer, but to watch, guardians of balance, keepers of silence, and proof that when humanity retreats, it is not to surrender, but to return stronger than the galaxy can ever imagine. The Galactic Council was no more, its banners torn down, its marble halls crumbling beneath the weight of its own lies, yet across the stars the silence that followed was not peace. It was reflection, the kind that makes even. The most powerful civilizations look inward and question what they had become, and in that silence humanity watched them all, unseen, patient, guiding the galaxy like shadows in the light. The Terran fleet remained in the void, an unspoken reminder of what happens when arrogance meets consequence, their ships drifting in formation around worlds once hostile, now reverent. On the command deck of the flagship Sol Dominion, Admiral Kira Holt stood beside the wide observation window, the light of a dying star casting golden lines across her face. "The Council is gone," said her first officer quietly. "The galaxy is rebuilding without them." Kira's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Good," she replied, her voice calm and steady. "Let them rebuild with memory instead of pride." Behind her, thousands of officers moved in near silence, each connected through neural link, their thoughts as synchronized as their heartbeat. The Terran fleet no longer needed orders shouted across decks. They moved as one mind, one intent, to restore balance, not domination. But even balance comes with burden. On the former Council worlds, chaos followed liberation. Species long oppressed now sought revenge, old rivalries reignited, and new factions rose from the ashes claiming power where none should exist. Humanity could have crushed them with ease, yet they did not. Instead, they watched, intervening only when the innocent suffered. Human drones, silent silver spheres, appeared above battlefields, projecting holographic messages of warning: peace is not submission. Violence breeds chains. Those who ignored the warnings found their weapons melted mid-conflict, their ships disabled, their leaders vanished overnight. No one saw where they went, but whispers spread that they were taken to a place beyond stars, a place humans called the Ark of Silence, where those who had forgotten compassion were taught through isolation what words could not. Entire civilizations began to fear not death, but being forgotten by humanity, for to vanish from Terran notice was to be erased from history itself. One such civilization, the proud Varnak Empire, attempted rebellion. Their warlords, furious at their loss of influence, declared humanity a false god, claiming they would never bow to ghosts. They rallied a fleet, massive and desperate, armed with Forbidden Council relics. 4 days, their broadcasts filled the galaxy, their commanders boasting that they would burn human space and reclaim the stars. And then, on the 5th day, every transmission stopped. The entire fleet, 2,000 warships, ceased to exist, not destroyed, not captured, simply gone, leaving behind only drifting fragments of metal etched with a single phrase, "This is not vengeance. This is understanding." The Varnak homeworld entered mourning, their people realizing that humans had spared them the agony of war by ending it before it began. From that day, their children prayed not to their ancient gods, but to the unseen Terrans who taught them humility through silence. In the archives of the archivist race, the oldest beings in the galaxy, a new chronicle began. It was written not in their elegant code, but in human tongue. It told of the rise, the fall, and the return of the Terrans, of how they once vanished to learn patience, how they returned to teach consequence, and how they left again so others might grow. They became something beyond us, one archivist wrote, neither rulers nor saints, but mirrors. They showed us ourselves and left us to decide whether to look away. The archivists spread this story across the stars, ensuring that no world would ever again forget the power of silence. And yet, deep within Terran space, there was unrest among the younger humans, those born after the Great Retreat, who had never known the pain of being mocked or erased. They questioned the restraint of their leaders. Why do we hold back? They asked. Why not lead openly? Why not take what is ours? Admiral Kira listened to their arguments with quiet patience. Because we are not gods, she said softly, and because the galaxy must never fear us again. They must respect us without chains. Her words calmed most, but not all. In the dark corners of the fleet, whispers grew of factions who believed humanity should rule, not watch. They called themselves the True Line, descendants of the old Terran militarists who once led the Great Wars. And though their numbers were few, their ambition burned bright. Meanwhile, the galaxy transformed under Terran guidance. Planets once torn by greed began rebuilding with shared technology, clean energy, and equality enforced by unseen hands. Trade routes reopened, faster and safer under Terran algorithmic control. Famine ended on dozens of worlds, and education spread in languages simplified and optimized by human AI. But even peace creates unease. The Council's fall had left a void, and into that void, fear began to seep again. Some races whispered that humanity had become too powerful, that even in silence they ruled all. And in that fear, small rebellions formed. On the planet Rethal Prime, a group of zealots hacked a Terran monitoring satellite, broadcasting a challenge across the stars: "We reject the Watchers. Let them face us openly." For 3 days, the broadcast continued unanswered. On the 4th, the sky of Rethal Prime went dark, and the stars vanished, replaced by the reflection of a single ship descending through the atmosphere. The ground shook, oceans rippled, and every creature on the planet fell silent. Then a voice echoed across the entire hemisphere, deep and human, but without anger. You mistake quiet for weakness. You mistake patience for fear. You forget that peace has guardians. When the ship left, the rebellion was gone. No one knew how or where, only that in its place stood a single monument carved into the desert. Peace endures when fear learns silence. Years passed, and the galaxy entered a new era historians called the Age of Listening. Every species learned to value quiet reflection as the highest form of intelligence, and Terran teachings became universal philosophy. Councils were rebuilt, not as empires but as alliances. Humanity remained distant, a myth to most, their ships unseen but their influence constant. Every few years, their signals pulsed through the network, a reminder that they were still there. 3 heartbeats, 1 message. Entire generations grew up believing that silence itself was sacred, that within it lay wisdom, power, and mercy. But in the solitude of the void, aboard the Sol Dominion, Admiral Kira stood before her star map and whispered to herself, "They've learned our silence. Now, let us see if they've learned our voice." Her ship began to move, engines igniting for the first time in decades. Across Terran space, other ships followed, rising from the shadows like ghosts reborn. They were not going to war, They were going to speak again, to guide openly, to remind the galaxy that humanity's reckoning was not destruction, it was renewal. As the first human fleet emerged into the galactic core, the stars seemed to flicker brighter, as if the universe itself acknowledged their presence. Across countless worlds, receivers came alive, broadcasting one final message in the ancient Terran tongue. We have watched. We have taught. Now, we walk beside you once more. Remember what silence gave you, and never forget what broke it. And as the message faded, a deep pulse echoed through every system, a heartbeat so vast it could be felt through the hulls of ships and the soil of planets, reminding all who heard it that humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as guardians, their silence now a promise rather than a threat, their reckoning complete, their purpose eternal. The stars had grown quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of silence, one born not from fear or arrogance, but from understanding. Across the galaxy, the scars left by the Council's fall began to heal, and every world that once trembled before the weight of false peace now looked to the sky with hope. Humanity had withdrawn once more, their great ships fading into the deep void like whispers at the edge of a dream, leaving behind a galaxy that finally understood why silence was sacred. Yet even in their absence, the mark of their return remained everywhere, in rebuilt cities powered by clean Terran energy, in the songs of alien children who spoke of the reckoning as both warning and salvation, in the quiet of night when the stars pulsed 3 times, reminding all who watched that humanity was still listening. On the hidden world of Solace, the new heart of Terran Command, Admiral Kira Holt stood beneath a transparent dome that revealed the endless stretch of stars. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, older now, wiser, burdened yet at peace. We changed them, said her first officer softly, stepping beside her. But did we save them? Kira's eyes followed the slow movement of a passing comet. Salvation was never our purpose, she said. Understanding was. In the distance, deep within the Terran archives, human historians recorded the final phase of their mission. They called it the balance accord, the unseen agreement between watcher and watched, between those who act and those who learn. Humanity had chosen restraint over rule, guidance over glory, and in doing so, they had become the quiet architects of order. The galaxy adapted, slowly, awkwardly, but genuinely. On the former council capital, once drenched in deceit and pride, alien farmers now worked the soil, turning the marble ruins into fields of golden grain. The statues that once honored the council's arrogance now bore a single engraving in every language, peace built on silence, preserved by truth. Across the core worlds, every planet carried a small beacon of Terran design that pulsed once a year, 3 steady beats, followed by a single message, remember why we stopped. And yet, even as this new era of balance flourished, unease stirred among those who had never known the wars, who had only heard the stories. To them, humans were myths, distant gods who appeared when the galaxy strayed too far from humility. They began to worship the silence, mistaking patience for divinity, and in their reverence, they forgot the lesson, that humanity had never sought to be gods, only reminders. Beyond the mapped galaxies, in the infinite dark where light itself bends, the Terran fleet continued to drift. They no longer needed bases, nor colonies. Their ships had become ecosystems of their own, home to generations of humans born under artificial skies, raised on stories of Earth, the blue world that began it all. Earth itself remained untouched, its coordinates removed from every database, hidden even from its own children. It was their greatest secret, their symbol of restraint. One day, Kira had said in a transmission recorded for future leaders, when the galaxy has learned not to fear silence, we will return home. That recording became legend among the younger officers, a promise that one day humanity would stop being shadows and become light again. And in that dream, something began to shift. The new generation of humans, children of the long silence, started to question their endless waiting. They wanted to see, to explore, to build again, not as watchers, but as participants. They looked to the void and saw potential, not danger. They looked at alien civilizations and saw equals, not pupils. Humanity had learned patience. Now it was time to learn purpose again. On the 10th anniversary of the reckoning, a single ship broke formation. It was small compared to the great carriers, an exploration vessel named Aurora. Its captain, a young human named Elias Ward, requested permission to cross into the open sectors, to speak, not through transmissions, but face-to-face. "We've shown them fear," he said in his report. "Now let's show them friendship." Many within the fleet opposed it, fearing it would undo centuries of careful balance. But Kira, watching from her silent station, approved the mission. "Let the silence end," she said. Aurora departed under the light of a red dwarf, vanishing into the unknown. Weeks later, alien communication hubs across dozens of systems detected something they hadn't seen in decades. A human signal, open and unencrypted. It was a voice, warm and calm. "To all who hear this," it said, "we are returning, not to judge, not to rule, but to walk beside you once more." The message spread faster than any council decree ever had. On every world, people stopped what they were doing to listen, and when the message ended, a soft heartbeat echoed in the air. 3 beats, the eternal symbol of humanity's promise. In the following years, humanity's silence became dialogue. Terran envoys appeared openly again, not in ships of war, but in vessels of light. They helped rebuild lost worlds, reopened forgotten trade routes, and shared their knowledge freely. The galaxy learned that the true strength of humanity was not in their weapons, but in their memory, in their refusal to forget pain, injustice, and beauty. And as generations passed, the old fear transformed into respect, the kind that runs deeper than power. Humanity became a myth no longer. They became a legacy, a story told in every corner of the cosmos, one that always ended the same way. They came, they fell silent, and when they spoke again, the galaxy listened. Admiral Kira Holt, now at the twilight of her years, looked once more into the void from her command ship and whispered, "We were never their rulers. We were their reflection." Her words carried through the fleet's internal comms, stored in the archives as her final log. Moments later, she ordered the fleet into deep drift, their engines dimming one last time. The stars around them flickered like candles in a dark cathedral as the ships disappeared into the cosmic horizon. Across the galaxy, sensors detected the faint pulse again. 3 steady beats, a final whisper of farewell. The message spread to every corner of creation, translated into every language, etched into stone and sky alike. Silence is not absence. It is peace earned. And in that moment, the galaxy truly understood what humanity had meant all along, that the greatest power was not in destruction or dominance, but in restraint, in knowing when to speak and when to listen, and in that lesson, the stars found harmony. The reckoning had ended, but the story of humanity became the heartbeat of the universe itself, steady, eternal, and forever heard between the moments when everything else falls quiet.